Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning, we're a block behind. Today we're learning Maseches, Bava, Basra, Daf, Mem Beis, and Mem Gimel Amid Aleph. Tomorrow night we'll do probably two blot so that we're ready for Shabbos. I will not be here for Shabbos, Sunday or Monday. I've asked my handler to take over. So he'll be giving shiur on Shabbos and Sunday. Monday is Erev Tisha B'Av. I don't know what he's going to do. I just know that I'm not doing it. I will be out of town. Huh? Can't learn Monday night. No, but the question is just to do just a morning shiur, like after one of the chakras. So, and then Tuesday, we'll do. No, I don't like being behind. I like having plans. Like I'm not happy that we're behind right now, but all good. We'll figure it out. We'll still finish us the same day, June 7th, 2027, rapidly approaching. All right, we're on the bottom of Mem Aleph Amid Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. And we've been talking about variations of the establishment of a chazaka, where I squat on your property for a certain amount of time to the point that I actually own it. And the Gemara now begins to give different iterations of what that chazaka might look like. And here on the bottom of Mem Aleph Amid Beis, the Gemara says, Shlosha lekuchos mitzdarfin. Let's say the property belongs to Michael. I'm there for a year, Gerald is there for a year, and David is there for a year. So the conclusion of all of this is Shlosha lekuchos is mitzdarfin, is that if that's true, then the property no longer belongs to the original guy because a chazaka was made. And the chiddush of the Gemara over here is pretty obvious. A chazaka that removes it from the original owner's property does not have to come from only one person. It can come from a variation of people as long as sachakol, no macha was ever made. That's a chiddush. That's not such a, I mean, in the Gemara it assumes that it's simple, but it's not so simple. I could have easily said, no. The chazaka has to be one person because the kinyan is by one guy. No, it has to be, it doesn't have to be that way, even a set of 3 people. The Gemara then qualifies this, and this is going to lead us into a shakla v'tarya about Rav. The Gemara says, Amar Rav v'kulam b'shtar. Yes, they have to have the 3 years, but each of the 3 people have to have a shtar. So I have to have a shtar that says I bought it from Michael. Gerald has to have a shtar that says he bought it from me, and David's going to have a shtar that says he bought it from Gerald, and then that's considered valid. So the Gemara makes a diuk. The Memra, this seems to imply to Savar Rab shtar islay kala ve'edim leslu kala. It seems to be that there's enough of a kol, of a shtar, there's enough of a rumor mill. Oh my gosh, did you hear? Phil bought it from Michael, Gerald bought it from Phil, David bought it from Gerald. There's enough of a kol that the owner should have then known to make a macha. And by virtue of the fact that Rav said that this only works with a shtar, that implies that it wouldn't work with edim. So it seems to be that a shtar has a kol, but edim doesn't have a kol. But that can't be, because 2 lines from the bottom, V'amarab, hamocher sadeh be'edim. Here, this isn't a case of shtar. This is a case of edim. And when there are edim, even though it's only edim, still gova min nechasim mishubadim. We see that one is allowed to collect even from properties that are mishubad, which means that edim do have a kol. So how can Rav, or I should say better, why does Rav say on the 4th line from the bottom, v'kulam b'shtar? He should have said v'kulam b'shtar uve'edim, because we see on the bottom that Rav said that edim do function as ones who are able to generate a kol. So the Gemara says, Hasam, in the case of Rav on the bottom of Mocher Sadeh be'edim, there that Gemara was talking about a case where inhu afsidu anav shayhu. There the buyers in that case did not do the research. When you buy a property, you should ask, are there any liens on this property? Otherwise, you're a bad businessman. You're not a knowledgeable buyer, and you're going to be the one who takes the loss. So therefore, the Gemara says the cases aren't the same. And on the top of Mem Beis Amid Aleph, the Gemara says, Umi Amar Rav Hachi. Does Rav really say that this is true? Does Rav say what is true? Let's look at the Rashbam, 6 lines down. Umi Amar Rav Hachi, the Mechiras Karka be'achrayis be'edim below shtar gove halokeach. That if karka is sold be'achrayis with edim and without a shtar that someone can collect, back in the Gemara, after all the hatznan. Hamalbes chavero b'shtar. If there's a loan that's done with a shtar, gova min nechasim mishubadim, then we do allow collecting from properties that have a lien. But al yedei edim, that's a lower level, and therefore only gova min nechasim b'nei chorin. So what do we see? We see that really edim is. You tried to just say edim and shtar are the same. This Mishnah that we're looking at on the 2nd line over here, which we're going to see at the end of this Masechta again, this Mishnah seems to say that no. I know Rav just tried to say that that shtar and edim have the same kol. That's not true. We see from this Mishnah, black on white at the end of the Masechta, quoted here on the second line, that there's a difference between shtar and edim. So says the Gemara, if you want to argue that Rav, who says that shtar and edim are similar, is Tana hu upalig. Rav is a Tana, and he gets to argue on Mishnayos. We've spoken about this probably 50 times, that Rav lived in the Dor HaMa'avar, in the transitionary generation between the Tanaim and Amoraim. And because he was a direct Talmud of Rav, a Rebbe, he therefore had the capacity to argue with other Tanaim. If you want to say that, and therefore the Machlokes would be that Rav holds that the Kol of Ashtar and Edim are the same. And the Mishnah at the end of Bava Basra holds that no, the Kol of Ashtar is greater than the Kol of Edim. That can't be, because Rav Shmuel da Amrei Tarvayu, Rav and Shmuel both say that by milve al peh, that when there is a verbal loan, and that is a reference to Edim. So we see that there is a difference between Edim and Shtar. So Rav is Soser himself. So therefore, the Gemara says, no, you asked the wrong question. The Mishnah that we got at the end of the Masechta, this one that's on the second line here, of Hamalve Eschavera B'Shtar, and where we see that Shtar has a higher level than Edim. So that the Gemara says, Milve Azvini Karamis. We were dealing with a case of a sale. That was Rav's line at the bottom of Mem Aleph Amud Beis. You're asking from a case of loan? How can you ask a kasha on the case of loan from the case of a sale? Loans are very different. And the Gemara actually paints a perfect picture of the distinction between a loan and a purchase. Milve, when it comes to a loan, people are typically a little embarrassed to say that they have a loan. Ki kayazif bitzina kayazif. When a person takes a loan, they typically do so in secrecy. Why? Because if you know that I'm borrowing money, you're going to want to interact with me at 80 cents on the dollar. You're not going to want to treat me like a regular businessman. So therefore, that people won't lower the cost of the products that I own. If I'm taking a loan, you know I'm cash poor. Maybe I'm asset rich, but I'm cash poor. Okay, Phil needs money. All right, Phil, I know you're trying to sell your property at 123 Main Street for 600, but because I saw that you had a loan, I'm only going to give you 500. Very reasonable move. That's a classic good business move. Very good. So then the Gemara says that's why you can't ask from Malve to Zvini, because Malve, a person hides, but Zvini, man zavin ara bifar hesya zavin. When a person buys land, it's the exact opposite. They put up a sign on the front lawn that says sold. You want everyone to know that you bought a house. That's a beautiful thing. And therefore, the reason we did it is to have a kol. So the Gemara pulls out the carpet from under the question. We tried to ask from a Mishnah against Rav. The Gemara says the Mishnah is talking about a loan. Rav was talking about a transaction, a purchase. Those two things are oil and water. They're not comparable. Your question's a zero. So sometimes when you ask a question, you give an answer. Here we're saying your question wasn't a question. You can't ask from Malva to Zvini. Those two things are not compatible. As I learned in chemistry from my father, there's a principle of like dissolves like. When you have things that are of a similar nature, you can talk about them binding together. But when they're not similar, they don't combine. You cannot ask a kasha on the world of sale from the world of loan. You're not able to do that. So it's not a good comparison. 1/3 of the way down on Mem Beis Menal Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis have taught us in a brisa. Achla ha'av shana b'haben shtayim. Let's say that my father is squatting on someone's property. He's there for a year, and then he decides to become a snowbird, and I take over, and I'm living in this property that he squatted in for 1 year. I'm now there for 2 years, or the reverse, ha'av shtayim v'haben shana, or ha'av shana v'haben shana v'halokeach shana. All three of these iterations, all of them is harei zu chazaka. Okay, so my father and I can join together to generate 3 years of chazaka, and as well, my father and me, and then if I sell it to a lokech, to a buyer, that also works. That's all considered to be a sale. Now that's very similar to the din that we started with today, 5 lines from the bottom of Shlosha Lekuchos Mitzarfin. Very similar, except that not all of ours are lekuchos. One's father's son. Lav dafka that it's lekucha. A son may get it be a rusha from his father. It might be a shutfis, and we'll speak about all of that a little bit more. And the Gemara says, lememra, what's implied from here is the lokeach islay kala, that the purchasing has a kol, which is actually what we just said a few lines ago. But the Gemara says that this is problematic to assume that a sale has a kol. Why? Because uraminhi, we have a Tosefta. We have a Tosefta in, I presume it's in Bava Basra. It doesn't say otherwise, but it's not from this parak. It's from the previous parak. And the Gemara says in the Tosefta halfway down, Achla bifnei ha'av shana ubifnei haben shtaim. Let's say a squatter is sitting on my father's property for a year, and then I inherit the property and he squats on the property while I am there for 2 years. Or bifnei ha'av shtaim ubifnei haben shana, or the other way around. He sits in the property while my father lives there for 2 and I watch it for 1. Or bifnei ha'av shana ubifnei haben shana ubifnei lokeach shana, or the squatter is on that property while my father is there for a year, while I'm there for a year, and while the lokeach is there for a year. So says the Gemara, harezu chazaka. What we see over here is that this is considered to be a valid chazaka. So says the Gemara, v'isal kadaitach lokeach islay kala. If what you're saying is that when there is a sale, that generates a kol, well, then one of the cases that we just learned is that someone was on the property while my father lived there, and then someone was on the property while I lived there, and then what did I do? I sold it to another person. Still, what do we say? We still say hareze chazaka, but no, that should have been the fact that the son was able to sell it should have been the macha, because it shows that it's his and not the squatter's. Oh, it's a great argument. So the Gemara says, a beautiful argument. However, Amar Papa Kitanya Hahi, the brisa that speaks about the fact that the son sold a property was b'mocher sedosav stam. It wasn't that he sold this property; it's that he sold a field among all of the fields, and therefore not a raya. That brings us to the next Mishnah on Membez Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the bottom. Ha'umnin ve'ashutvin ve'ha'arisin ve'aputropin ein lem chazaka. Ha'umnin is a worker, a shutaf is a business partner, and aris is a sharecropper who gets a percentage of what he harvests. Aputropin is basically like a property manager. Ein lem chazaka. If I have a worker on my field for 3 years because he's my worker, that's not a chazaka. I paid the guy to be there. The context matters. The reason why he's there matters. The shutaf, you're my business partner, you own half of it. What do you mean you're a squatter? That's not shaykh that you should be a squatter. You own half the property. You can't be a machzik. An aris, you only get a percentage of the crop. You're my worker, you're my employee. And apotropin is a property, same deal. You work for me. It doesn't work. Ein lem chazaka. And the Mishnah continues, Lo ish chazaka b'nichse ishto v'lo isha chazaka b'nichse baila. There is no way to create a chazaka on a wife's property, which is namely the nichse melug. These are the properties that she brings into the marriage. And reverse is also not the case because she's somech al shulchano. She's fed by him because whatever money she makes goes to him. He has to take care of her. I can't squat on my father's property, and the reverse is also true. But by medvarim amurim, when are these rules of the Mishnah that we have learned thus far, when are they true? B'machzik, that's when you're establishing a chazaka, which requires a higher standard of proof. Remember that we said, kol chazaka she'eni matayna ein chazaka, right? We have a higher standard by chazaka. However, says the Gemara, the Mishnah, aval benosein matana, when we're dealing with giving a gift, or brothers that are splitting a property, or while the previous 2 cases have nothing to do with chazaka, when we're talking about making a kinyan on the property of a ger, we have to remember that a ger is very different than it, because a ger is kikatan shenoladami. He doesn't have the same status as an adult when it comes to chazaka. In all of these cases, if you are no'al v'gadar uparatz kolshu, if I'm able to lock up that property, or if I fence in the property, or paratz, I break a wall just a little bit, harezu chazaka in all of those cases. The 3 cases that we were talking about is the giving of a gift, brother splitting up property, or making a chazaka by a ger. That brings us to the top of Mem Beis Mid Beis at the very top of the page, where we see a machlokes between the very, very early Amoraim. Avuha de Shmuel v'Levi tanu. They actually taught a brisa. Really, it's more accurately a tosefta. We've learned this before. Levi and Bar Kapara were the authors of the Tosefta, or they were really the Malaktim. They gathered all of them, just like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did for the Mishnayos. Levi and Bar Kapara did for the Tosefta. So Avua de Shmuel, and Rashi, the Rashbam adds in Vigam Levi Chavero, because I don't even know what he's doing. What's the Rashbam doing?
Shmuel, they were brothers. Levi was a friend.
What's one thing?
Father.
What does that have to do with anything?
What?
I wouldn't have thought they were brothers. Why
I
did you?
wouldn't either, but maybe somebody could. And it's not Rashi. That might be the answer.
It might be. So you're saying the other way to have read it was Avuha, the father of the Shmuel V'Levi.
I don't
Lo ala bedaiti.
think. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a Talmud Chacham, I'm just saying it wouldn't have crossed my mind.
But you are.
That's adorable. Everybody stop talking. I'm giving this year now. Not all of these. Yeah, I know. Seriously. That's true. Is that still the picture of our WhatsApp group? I think so. That was a great picture of the three of us. Okay, so these two individuals who are not brothers, they're friends. They taught as follows. Shutaf ein lo chazaka. You're right. Business partners cannot establish a chazaka. The kol shekain uman. All the more so a worker. Here's the svara. If as a shutaf you don't have a chazaka when you own half of it, then as an uman where you own none of it, all the more so you shouldn't be able to establish a chazaka. However, Shmuel, which was, again, there was Avua to Shmuel. This is Shmuel's son, the Shmuel that we know, Shmuel and Rav of that. Shmuel Tani Uman ein lo chazaka, aval shutav yesh lo chazaka. He flips it and he argues with our Mishnah. And he says that a shutav is able to establish a chazaka. All I own is 50%. I'm allowed to squat on the other half. I have more rights to the property. You're correct. But yes, in fact, I can squat on that property and earn the other half that my business partner owns. Shmuel actually is l'shitaso that the shutav can make a chazaka. Where do we see this? The Amar Shmuel shutav machzik and zelzeh. That's pretty simple. That a shutav is able to be machzik. Shmuel teaches two other dinim, one of which we're going to discuss today. Umeidin zelzeh. One shutav can give testimony toward his other shutav, which is very interesting. We're business partners. What about this principle that we know of called nogea be'edusan? I'm nogea b'davar. If Mark and I are business partners and I have to give testimony for him, it's going to be very desirable for me to be saying things in the positive about him. So that's the second thing that Shmuel says is the case, that me'idin ze'al zeh, that business partners can testify on one another. And v'na'asim shomrei sachar zelazeh. They become shomer sachar for all of their products, seemingly automatically. We're not going to learn about this din now. Okay, so says the Gemara, that's how we know that Shmuel holds of his shita. It's l'shita, so that an uman is not allowed to make a chazaka, but that a shutaf is allowed to make a chazaka. Rami le Rabbi Abba le Rabbi Huda, b'ma'arta debe Rav Zakai. This is a beautiful piece of Jewish history. Beautiful. Maybe it's reminiscent, people living in shelters. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Abba said to Rabbi Yehuda in the cave of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, it was a time of Shas Hashmat, Mi Amar Shmuel Shutav Yesh Lo Chazaka. Did Shmuel really say that if Mark and I are business partners, that I can make a chazaka on the half of the property that Mark and I own the whole thing, but can I squat on the property in such a way where I can take the whole property? Amar Shmuel Shutav Ke Yord Bershus Dami. A shutav is no different than someone that I give permission to be there. He's a yorei birshus. He doesn't have any special privileges, and no, he cannot make a chazaka. So that's a Shmuel stira minei ubei. Lab lemeimer the shutav ein lo chazaka. Doesn't that imply that Shmuel was so sir himself that on the top of the page where he says shutav yesh lo chazaka, over here it implies shutav ein lo chazaka. Says the Gemara lo kasha. We could spend about a half hour on the next 12 words. We're not going to. Fair warning, we're not going to. But there's a lot to be said here. The Gemara says there's a difference between the two cases of Shmuel. Ha denachis lakula. One is when the partner went into the entire property. Ha denachis lapalga. One is when the shutaf who tried to make a chazaka went into only half the property. But we don't know which answer applies to which Shmuel. We don't know which one is the chazaka. Is it when he only was in that palga, or was it in the whole thing? And the Gemara calls this out. Amri la lahaygisa, the Amri la lahaygisa. Some say that we look at the first part of the answer of hadanachis lakula. Some say that's the case of yes chazaka. Some say that's the case of no chazaka. And the same is true for the second half. Ayin Sham and the Rishonim. It's one of the reasons why the lines on this page is very short, is to help navigate this. Good. The Gemara says that there is another answer to the stira of Shmuel. Ravina Amar, 2/3 of the way down on Mem Beis and Mid Beis. Hava hadanachis lakula. We're talking about a case where the squatter, the shutaf, where I go into the property that Mark and I own, and I'm there the whole time. I'm navigating the whole field. This is a throwback. We learned about this earlier in the Maseches, that when we are allowed to be mechalik, it's only true when the space is divisible in such a way where each person gets their requisite amount of space. We learned it in the end when we talk about the open space in front of the door. It's 4x8 per person in Amos. So that's in one case yesh bo chazaka, because I'm able to then squat properly. In the other case, it's not like that. The Gemara says, Gufa, let's analyze this din of Shmuel. Shutav ki yori birshus dami. This was the kasha that we saw a couple lines ago. That was a kasha on our original sheet of Shmuel. That shutav is like someone who goes into a rishus ma'ikam ashmalan. If what Shmuel was trying to say was shutvus ein lo chazaka, then just say that. If the line of shutav ki yor b'shus dami is to teach me ma'ikam ashmalan and shutav ein lo chazaka, then lema shutav ein lo chazaka. Please say what. Don't speak in code. Don't speak in code. Just say what you mean. If the line of shutav yor b'shus dami means that there's no chazaka, then please just say it. It's so much clearer. It says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua, there is a difference. And we had to say that the shutaf who has permission to go into the field, we had to say it this way because there's a perk to being a shutaf. What's the perk to being a shutaf, and why is it therefore that Shmuel said shutaf ki yor b'shus dami? Says the Gemara, because lomar, that when he does take something as a shutaf, if you give me permission to go into your half of the field, shenota b'shvacha magir l'chtafayim, when I go to take from the full harvest that's available, so when you're a shutaf, you get the following perk. That's true. That's true in a field that really isn't appropriate to be planted yet. We treat it as though kisada hasuyalita. But shutaf, you get a perk. You get a higher kickback. That's the benefit of being a business partner. It's woven into the contract of the business agreement between the two of them. All right, let's talk about the next sugya. Last couple of words on Membeis and Medbeis. When we eat in Zelazeh, we said that Shutfin can be made Zelazeh. That brings us to the top of Mem Gimel Amid Aleph. The Gemara says, Amai. Why would you ever, if Mark and I are business partners, why would I ever be able to give Edus about Mark and vice versa? Nogin be'edusanhein. These two people are nogeh b'davar. The Rashbam says on the top line, Dibur hamaschil nogin be'edusanhein. The calls man shelo chilku legamre. If in fact they have not split their properties, they're not done being business partners. Im yitol shum me'ar klum min hasadeh yafsidu shnehem b'nimsa de la'atzmo made. Because anything that affects my partnered land will affect both of us. So if I therefore try to support Mark in a claim against him, that is to my benefit. That means I'm nogea be'edusan, which means that my edus should be completely batel. So says the Gemara, no, hacha b'may askinan, to kasavle, I'm allowed to give edus about Mark, but on the condition that I write, dinu dvarm ainli al sadezu. If I write, yes, Mark and I are business partners, but not on this property. We have other things together, not this. So the Gemara says that's not a good answer. Even if you write, even if I wanted to give testimony for Mark, but I write that I have nothing to do with this property, my have, that's not helpful. Why? Because Ve'atanya, we have a brisa that we have seen three times already in Shas, at least. Ve'atanya, ha'omer lechavero, a man says to his friend, dinu dvarm ainli al sadezu ve'inli esek ba v'yadi mesuleka semena. These three kinds of languages that basically say, I've removed myself. I have nothing to do with that property anymore. Lo amar klum. Flat, nothing. You haven't accomplished a thing by saying that. So if that brisa is correct, the brisa from Ketuvos and Gittin, that even if I try to, totally remove myself, recuse myself from the property and say, I have nothing to do with that property, it doesn't matter if you said that. Lo amar klum. So that can't be an answer. So answer number one is blown out of the water. The Gemara pivots to answer number two. You're right. In what case did Shmuel say that a shutaf is allowed to give testimony for his partner? How can I testify on behalf of Mark? That must only be kshakanu miyado, when the property in discussion was purchased already from me. Not that I write dinu dvarim ainli, that I have nothing. No, I'm not even the owner anymore. I'm not saying I won't take any proceeds. That's not enough. But what I am saying is I don't own it anymore. So if it's kshakanu miyado, that Phil doesn't own it anymore, then I can therefore give testimony. That's what Shmuel meant when Shmuel said that the shutaf can be made on his friend. That's only true kshakanu miyado. Says the Gemara, that doesn't work either. V'chikanu miyado may have. Who cares if Phil got rid of the property? Hare ma'amida b'fnei bal chovo. I'm still standing in front of the Baal Chov. I'm still with Mark, and that's still too much of a shutvus. Where do we see this idea that I'm not allowed to stand in front of my Baal Chov, even though I don't own the property anymore? The Gemara says, "The Amar Ravin bar Shmuel mishmei de Shmuel hamocher sado lechaver shelo be'achrayis." If I sell a piece of property to a friend that has no achrayis, ein made lo aleha. Even though there's no achrayis, I can't testify on him, even though he can never come back to me. Because if I sell you a property shelo be'achrayis, That means that if someone who I owe money takes that property from me, that means you're not allowed to have tainas on me. So even though there's a sever between me and Mark in that way, in that even though he sold me property shul b'achrayas that I could never go back to him, still I'm not allowed to testify. Why? Because it's not allowed. Ayin in the Rishonim, but it's not allowed. So therefore, answer number 2 doesn't work. And the Gemara says, you're 100% right. Here's answer number 3, trying to define what Shmuel meant by saying that Shutvin can be made in Zalzeh. The Gemara says a quarter of the way down, to Kabila le Achrayas. We're talking about a case where there is a Kabbalas Achrayas. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Achrayas Deman. What kind of achrayas did he accept upon himself that he's allowed to become a shutaf? Inem achrayas de alma. If you want to say that we're talking about achrayas de alma, that we're talking about a random person who says, Karesh owes me money, kolshken denichale, that's pashat that I would not be able to give testimony in that case. Because if I testify for Mark, that benefits me because we're recollecting a property, divvied up in our partnership, that's money in my account. Ella must be achrayas de isay. We must be talking about a Kabbalah Achrayas of my relationship directly with Mark. So that's how we try and answer up all of these cases of, the specific case, I should say, of Shutfin can be Me'idin Zelazeh. Says the Gemara still, no dice. Even if I remove myself in its entirety, am I really ever fully removed from my Shutfus with Mark? V'atanya. B'nei ir shenignab sefer Torah shelahen. Let's say that there are people who Rahman al-Islan had a Sefer Torah stolen. The halacha is, Ein danin b'daine osa'ir. If there is a thief in that city, the Dayanim cannot adjudicate this case. And ve'ein mevi'in raya me'anshe osa'ir, no one can give testimony. Ve'im isa, if what you're saying is that a person could just be misalik themselves, and therefore they can give testimony, so lislaku beitrei minahu l'dainu. We just need to remove a couple of people from the mix so that those people can give testimony. Why don't we say that the people in that city where the Torah was stolen can give testimony? Says the Gemara, shiny Sefer Torah delishmiakoi. Everybody benefits from listening to the Sefer Torah. So therefore, no one in that community can give testimony. It's an unbelievable thing. Because your testimony is skewed no matter what. You're no geba davar. That's what the Gemara says about Sefer Torah. Everyone is skewed because we need a Sefer Torah. That's our life. That's our lifeline. That's how we live. Tashma, another brisa similar. Ha'omer tnu mana lebnei iri. If somebody says, please give that money to the people of my city, once a dayan says that, ein danen b'daine osa'ir vein mevi'in raya me'anshe osa'ir, about that money, because your opinion is skewed, it benefits your community. It's like kind of steering, a government fund to fund your community. Once you do that, you can't testify anymore about it. You're no geba davar, because anything you say negative, it's like when you're in a basketball game and the ball goes out of bounds and we're not sure what happens. Everyone on the same team always votes in the same direction. Always. They always just point this way. How could it be that there's 100% accuracy from one side that it belongs that way? And it's always like that. We're completely no geba davar. Same exact thing over here. If what you're telling me is you're giving testimony, and the result of your testimony is that you profit, you're no geba davar, and you can't speak anymore. But says the Gemara, why? Amai, just take out a couple of people from the mix who won't benefit from it, and then they're valid edim. You say the guys will say, "I know, we'll be the edim. We agree to not benefit from the money that's coming into our community." Then they can give testimony, no problem. Why don't we say that? Says the Gemara, "Hachanami Sefer Torah." Yeah, we're making a new kimta in the brisa, and what we're saying is this is also a case of Sefer Torah. And even though there's no money to be had, but you certainly benefit from listening to Torah. If we listen to the Torah 3 times a week, we listen to it all the time. So therefore, that case doesn't work either. Tashma, 2/3 of the way down. Heading toward the end of the page, we'll stop on the last line, and then we'll be done for the day. Let's say a person says, I'd like to give this amount of money to the poor people in my community. Then ein danen b'daine osa'ir, that no one in that, no dayanim can adjudicate on them on that money. Vein mevi and raya me'anshe osa'ir, no one in the city can talk about that case. They can't give any testimony at all because at the end of the day, whatever anybody says skews where the money goes, and because the money will go to the poor people, that helps the community. Says the Gemara V'tizbra, is this even logical? Aniyim shakle and daine mifsale. Just because money goes to poor people, why should the dayanim be precluded from adjudicating? The dayanim aren't poor; they don't get any money out of the deal. Could you imagine the dayanim? I'm just imagining the CRC. They write a grant in Springfield. The grant brings in $1 million for poor people, and then the Gemara says Rabbi Reese can't paskin any shah. Why can't Rabbi Reese paskin on the shah? He doesn't get a dime out of it. The money's not his. The money's going to poor people. So the Gemara says, how can you say, "V'tizra aniyim shakle daini mifsale"? Elema, you're right. Ein danin b'daine ani osa ha'ir. No, you can't talk about the poor judges of that city. The poor people can't adjudicate that. You have someone like who has a salary. You're saying Rabbi Reese can pass him no shai, there's no problem. That's not a psul on him. He doesn't benefit from the money. If the dayan is poor and he's the beneficiary of the $1 million from Springfield, okay, now I understand why he's no gebadover. Same question as before. Listalku betrei nafshayu v'ledainu. Why don't we just take two poor people who say, I'm agreeing not to get the money, but let me do the testimony because I actually know what happened. The Gemara says, nope, not happening. Here too, we're talking about a case of a Sefer Torah. If we're talking about a Sefer Torah, why did you call them poor people? The Brisa seems to be talking out of both sides of its mouth. The Gemara says, Sefer Torah aniyim hein. This is such a beautiful hashkafic line in a halachic Gemara. We are all poor relative to the Torah. Now, that's not a financial question. I think that's a relative to holding ourselves up to the bright light of the Torah. We are all poor. It's a beautiful idea. That's a little bit of musar for the 9 days. Good. Or you could fly United. Same thing. Says the Gemara, "V'ibai sema." I was just you. It was just for you. Yeah. V'ibai sema. Le'olam kediktani aniyim mamish. Really, what we're talking about actually is aniyim, not the ukimta that we're talking about a Sefer Torah. Ube'aniyeh deramu alayhu. But what we're really talking about is that the dayanim are responsible for the poor people. So let's change our Rabbi Reese case. Let's say with Rabbi Reese that he's not poor, Baruch Hashem, but he's helping the poor. But if the poor don't get the money from Springfield, then he has to cough up money. Then he's no gebadover. If he could fund them, not with CRC dollars, that's great. That's wonderful. So they write a grant and they get their lobbyists and they get the thing passed, $1 million come. But if it fails, so then his testimony is no longer valid because now he's on the hook to support those poor people. And therefore, his testimony doesn't work. What's the case? If what it means is that when there is no Springfield dollars, that everyone in the city has a poor person tax, whatever. Let's say that every day we were chayav for every person in the shul to give $1 a day, and that money would go to the poor. So there's a fixed amount of money. So then Rabbi Reese is not no geba davar. He has to give $1 just like me and you have to give $1. No difference. Leisvu beitrei minai my dekatzlahu daine. So then, okay, this isn't a big deal. Why are we saying that there's no problem at all? Everyone just give their money or just pay. So it must be the low kids, so it must be that there is no poor person tax, and therefore when Springfield doesn't work, so then Rabbi Reese is on the hook as an organization to fund them. Or we could say that no, there is a fixed poor person tax. Everybody does have to give, but still it's still beneficial for the community and beneficial for you, for the poor people to have more money. Now we talk about this in America too. If the people below the poverty line had more money, we know this from the studies, there'd be less crime, there's whatever. There's all of these benefits of poor people having money that benefit me, even though it's not dollars and cents. All right, we'll stop right here at the 2 dots. We'll pick up tomorrow night with 2 blot of Gemara. Don't worry, it's not very long. Mem Gimel Amud Beis and Mem Daled Amud Aleph is not even one amud of another Masechta, so we'll definitely be okay. And Amir Hashem will get that done. Again, I'm gone for Shabbos and Sunday and Monday, and Tuesday we're not learning either, so we'll figure it out. Wishing you all a beautiful night.